In de Verenigde Staten van Amerika is al bijna 20 jaar sprake van toenemende angst of afkeer voor de islam en moslims. Vaak leidt dit tot haat of discriminatie van moslims. Deze islamfobie, zoals dit genoemd wordt, is sinds de aanvallen van 11 september 2001 op de Twin Towers in New York en de Amerikaanse militaire invasie van Irak in 2003 fors toegenomen. Maar sinds enkele jaren zijn met de opkomst van strijders van ISIS in Syrië en Irak en de manier waarop de Amerikaanse media hierover berichten, anti-islamitische gevoelens in Amerika sterk toegenomen. De angst voor Arabieren, moslims en de islam leidt er vaak toe dat de godsdienst en de belijders ervan als gevaarlijk en gewelddadig worden afgeschilderd en gelijkgesteld worden aan terroristen. Welke lijnen en bedoelingen zijn er achter krachten die anti-islamitische gevoelens oproepen in westerse landen en de wereld? Kijkt u naar het eerste deel van een onderzoeksreportage van de Arabische satellietzender Al Jazeera.
I'm afraid of people that have an ideology akin to Sharia law that cannot coexist. Constantly telling us, no, go back to your country. You don't belong here. This is our America.
Secure the borders. Let's get us safe. Make America great again.
Got an ISIS flag hanging up over the Atlanta Capitol building. We go in, take out the bad guys.
Our country cannot be the victim of horrendous attacks by people that believe only in jihad.
Donald Trump came to power partly by capitalizing on the resentment of some Americans towards certain ethnic and cultural groups. He claimed, for example, that thousands of Arabs and Muslims stood here in New Jersey and celebrated when the Twin Towers fell. The attacks on the World Trade Center in September 2001 contributed towards a climate of fear in America, and the fear of terrorism and Islam have since become major issues in America. Some lobbyists and politicians have exploited this to the absolute full.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
I am Abdullah Al-Shami, and I'm in the US to examine the way Trump and his supporters and a close network of writers, campaigners, funders and politicians combined to bring about this critical moment in American history. The Southern American states have a history of discrimination going back to slavery and are where there's been the biggest rise of what's become known as white supremacy. The state of Georgia has some of the most liberal gun laws in the US, and the past 20 years has seen a growth in this kind of armed militia groups. Trump's campaign appealed to them, promising to protect their American way of life. I managed to gain access to one such group, the Georgia Security Force.
GSF, we show up, we kick ass, and go home and drink beer. That's what's up.
The group was on a training exercise and allowed me to observe. GSF see it as their duty to defend their country and constitution from enemies, both foreign and domestic.
Yeah, got an ISIS flag hanging up over the Atlanta Capitol building. GSF is in the neighborhood. We go in, we clear it, take out the bad guys, rescue the civilians, the hostages.
This is a message to the cowards who call themselves ISIS. We the people are bloodthirsty. We the people will have no mercy. We the people refuse to be the victim. No longer. We are the predators, you the prey. The rivers will run red with the blood of those who target Americans. Fire!
Given the opportunity, I would shoot them before they had a chance to harm other people, anybody.
I asked Chris what would happen if a Muslim asked to join the Georgia security force.
It's not limited to the color of a person's skin. It's based upon the context of the character. Let me see. I'd have to think, because I'd be leery. I have to do everything I can to make sure that we're not infiltrated.
Just because they're Muslim, or they have to be Christian?
No, give me a second. Let me think. That's a tough question. Tough question.
I don't know. When you put it in, slam it. Yeah.
Hey, Scorpion.
Yeah.
What do you say about Muslims attempting to join GSF?
Muslims attempting to join the GSF?
Yeah. What scares me, about Muslims joining is that I know that there are rogue elements that wish to do harm to people, and if I just don't see it. It's not as prevalent or widespread in other religions or beliefs or systems. So, it's a tough call. Tough call.
I was honestly quite surprised when Chris agreed to my meeting his group. His attitude to Muslims is pretty clear. He even teaches his children how to use guns.
I'm gonna do 3 shots.
What protection do you need?
If somebody breaks in, then we have that gun for safety.
Hold it tight, because it'll bounce up a little bit, okay?
Okay.
You ready?
Yep.
Men and women who died for my freedom, the President of the United States.
Chris and the GSF took part in a big local protest in September 2016. It was an armed demonstration against the proposed building of a mosque in Newton County. The protest raised security concerns, so the county government delayed granting the building permit. Chris invited me to his home. I was hoping that he and his friends might open up about the affairs of Islam.
My biggest fear is all I can think of is ISIS.
Like the terrorists and ISIS just starting a war.
Yeah, in here, not over here. Okay.
The way Chris talked showed a serious lack of understanding of Islam, which is worrying but probably not uncommon.
I believe that it's a religious, ideological, and political organization that isn't just limited to religion. I think the Sharia law is what most members that read the Quran, that's what they advocate for. It's this judicial system. The Constitution does not allow for another governing system to come in and share the same space as the Constitution itself.
Chris believes firmly in the Second Amendment to the American Constitution about his right to hold arms. However, he didn't seem quite so keen on the First Amendment relating to the free exercise of religion.
To bring something of that size and that scope to the outskirts of Newton County is alarming. It wasn't that it was just a mosque. It wasn't just elementary school. It wasn't just a high school. It wasn't just a college. It wasn't just a burial ground. It was a compound, you know, and using...
In 2015, the local Muslim community bought the land to build an Islamic center, Al-Ma'ad, 56 kilometers from the state capital of Georgia, Atlanta.
It's not a gated compound, it's just open space. If you see that this one, the yellow one, this is for mosque, you see that from here to here, 25 acres land. So we are using for maqbara or cemetery, and here's a 15 acres land, okay, for public park. Anyone can go. So this is our need. Some people are, the rumor, they're spreading that, look, what they will do with this 135 acres land. It's a huge, big land. They went inside the property, so they trespassed our property. And after that, they went to the courthouse when they threatened that they will stop the masjid project. They cannot do that because we know our right that as any religious institution, we have the right to practice our religion. This is the law in Constitution.
Local media coverage varied between support for and strong opposition to the mosque plans. When we were making this film, building work had not yet started. It was hard to see the project going ahead in the current US climate. Not far from where Chris and the GSF were training, I visited a summer camp in rural Georgia. The young people there were all born in America, and I asked them about Donald Trump.
He's not a big fan of us, I would have to say. And it kind of scares me, honestly. Just knowing what's in the future for anyone that's not white and American. Just in general, anyone that's like a minority, Muslims, like different races, so many different people, it worries me, and we don't know what's in store for us, but we'll see.
His supporters are constantly telling us, no, like, go back to your country. You don't belong here. This is our America.
My 6-year-old brother, he was just like, oh, Amir, looks like we're going back home now. So it just really brings me to tears when my younger brothers, like, just think half the things he's gonna do is gonna happen.
We have a new president, but we don't have a new constitution. The rules are still the same. So it's our job.
People here felt a strong sense of increasing Islamophobia in the US. Edward Mitchell was concerned about the image of Islam appearing in the mainstream media.
If I was not a Muslim and all I knew about Islam was what I saw in the evening news, I might be afraid of Muslims too. So I don't blame the average people who don't know any Muslims, who haven't studied Islam. I can understand why they might be confused or concerned. It's one thing to read anti-Muslim rhetoric on the internet or to see it on Fox News. It's another thing to hear it from the President of the United States. We're essentially defending ourselves in a two-front information war.
Parts of the right-wing media routinely speak quite negatively about Muslims and use powerful over emotive language.
I told you that you need to be afraid because they are coming for you. The ISIS assault, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria signals the beginning of the reverse crusade.
Apart from public broadcasting outlets, all US media are privately owned. According to 2012 Business Insider figures, 6 corporations own 90% of the media. General Electric, Disney, Viacom, Time Warner, CBS, and News Corp, owners of Fox News. I tried to talk to someone from Fox, but my request was declined. Fox News is arguably the most extreme of the mainstream TV channels in its coverage of Islam.
Many conservatives now live in a bubble where they never hear anything outside of media that has a strong right-wing conservative bias. They've watched it so much that they have done what I call self-brainwashing. They have gone from being perhaps moderately conservative to being rabidly conservative. And so these very, very narrow, highly ideological news sources have taken over. I don't know what you do about that in a free society.
I was interested in the concept of how fear actually works. So I visited the psychology department of New York University. What are the subliminal forces at work in people's phobias? Dr. Joseph Dunsmore was going to conduct an experiment.
So in the experiment, you're going to see different pictures of faces. Right before the face goes away, you may receive the electrical shock to your right wrist.
Oh, yeah.
You felt that? Okay.
What Dr. Dunsmore was suggesting was that we can learn to fear someone we already have a prejudice against, making it harder then to overcome it.
Through media, we acquire fears of things that we don't have direct experience with, but that have been communicated to us. And these use the same defensive fear circuitry as if you were having that direct experience. This could extend also to news footage of terrorist attacks, things that people are seeing replayed on television. They're learning from these experiences, but they are also affecting the brain in similar ways as if it was a direct experience. This can lead to phobias. They're consuming high levels of media about terrorist attacks.
These are the main figures in the anti-Islamic movement in the US. First is lawyer David Yerushalmi, co-founder of the American Freedom Law Center. He's a prime mover in legislation aimed at banning Sharia law in the US. Then there is Daniel Pipes, who runs the Middle East Forum. His hostility to Islam and the Arab world meant his appointment to the United States Institute of Peace was almost blocked in 2003. The journalist and commentator Stephen Emerson runs the investigative project on terrorism, which has suggested there is a Muslim conspiracy to take over the US. I made email requests to interview these three men, as well as Robert Spencer and Frank Gaffney. Gaffney runs the Center for Security Policy in Washington, D.C., and has suggested that mainstream Muslim organizations in the US want to destroy it from within. He's closely connected to the Trump administration, and the president has used Gaffney's research center to justify his policies towards Muslims.
This is the ultimate goal of charges of Islamophobia: to stigmatize, demonize, marginalize, and ultimately criminalize criticism of Islam.
Robert Spencer has ties to Americans for National Existence, with connections to Israel. His website, Jihad Watch, says its goal is to expose Islam and jihadists in the modern world. Spencer was barred by the UK for hate speech that could lead to inter-community violence. Spencer and Gaffney both turned down my requests for interviews. Robert Spencer works closely with an anti-Islamic campaigner in New York called Pamela Geller. Together they run the American Freedom Defense Initiative, the AFDI, which ran a campaign against Muslims in 2015, costing $100,000. Geller is best known for having campaigned against a plan to build a mosque near the World Trade Center in 2009.
I opposed the building of a mega mosque in a building that was destroyed in the 9/11 attacks because it was deeply offensive and it was deeply humiliating. And it was uncalled for. I'm very happy that it was defeated. I think it would have been Mecca on the Hudson.
I asked Geller about her 2009 campaign outdoor and on the New York subway, which had upset a lot of Muslims, and where the funding for it had come from.
Well, I've done a number of campaigns, so I'm not sure which one you're referring to, but in general, if your question is, where do I get funding for all of my campaigns? It comes from average Americans. The majority comes from people. We may have had contributions from organizations. Yeah, off the top of my head, I mean, I don't have my paperwork with me. I don't spend a lot of time on fundraising at all. I don't look into who gives money to my organization. No.
Nangawamping ano mo, bravo no kanya, edu anu orele kispo. Nyame nangapinga yusa ondro pemi kuturu, manasari kuturu, nangawanga nu nomo, boto no